Welcome, thinkers, to Season 3, Episode 20 of Thinking Critically. Today's topic is storytelling. And today, I'm joined by writer and podcaster Sam Bradley from the Starter Set Studios. Thank you ever so much for joining us today, Sam. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello, thank you very much for having me. Starter Set Studios used to be one podcast about Dungeons and Dragons where my incredibly knowledgeable friend Ed Sylvester, hello Ed, our sort of gimmick was I really wanted to learn about how to play Dungeons and Dragons and was quite in the world of fantasy and sci-fi and all the stuff you're supposed to be into Dungeons and Dragons. But I didn't know how to play, and I got a new job, and it was a really shitty job. And the only benefit was Ed sat behind me. And one day I said, "Oh, I'd love to play Dungeons and Dragons," and he got me, and he put his meat hook in me. And that was 3 or 4 years ago. So that became the podcast, and then as I was learning to play the game, I was also writing a campaign that became a homebrew campaign, and then the series, which we'll talk about later, I think, Tales of Tarthage. Tarthage being the city that my homebrew campaign takes place in. And that kind of grew as well into sort of a separate show that ran alongside Starter Set, the show, hence Starter Set Studios. And now Starter Set, the guide, original podcast has ended a couple of months ago. And we're starting a new project, Let's Get Shawarma, which is all about the impending Marvel Multiverse tabletop RPG, which will be a guide show similar to Starter Set, and also a Let's Play that I think I'm going to end up GMing, which is exciting. So that's what I do. I think aside from that, I am one of those forever DMs that really likes to play, but will not admit how much he likes the power of homebrewing and DMing a homebrew campaign. But I'm someone that got into it very quickly, very quickly and very hard. Like, I've only really been playing D&D for the last... Literally, I think the first time I played was the week after we recorded the first 3 episodes of Starter Set. So 2 years, 3 years, something like that. So yeah, I'm knowledgeable in bits of it, and then totally ignorant in other bits of it, which I think everyone is if they're honest with themselves.
Yeah. No, I'm like obsessive as well, and went hard and fast when the floodgates opened and I had the PHB. That was game over for the rest of my hobbies.
So I used to have a podcast before Starter Set that it doesn't run now, and that's kind of how me and Ed got to know that we had a bit of a thing on the mic. And there is a moment, I listened to it back actually because we put it out to our patrons a few months ago, where he's explaining how the role-play games work. And I go, "Oh, so you could do anything?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I'm not in it for the rest of that conversation. I'm like, "Oh no, this hobby's going to take over my fucking life." And it did.
I'm also feeling very attacked at your the thought there of the pleasure you get from making a homebrew world and leading players through it. I think that is what keeps me coming back, I have to say.
Well, yeah, it's the art of leading, isn't it? That's the thing, isn't it? That's the thing that separates storytelling in a conventional level to storytelling in Dungeons and Dragons. I think there's a difference, and I think that, as we'll get into, I think further down the line in this podcast, I think there is an art to both, and there is crossover, but there's also like crossover of being good and shit at both of them independently.
Yeah, well, I've thought of a question completely off the top of my head. What talking of storytelling, what does that mean to you? What does storytelling mean to you in the D&D and wider TTRPG framework?
I can talk only to D&D because it's the only TTRPG that I've played so far, specifically 5th edition because I'm that new in. I think storytelling is in D&D, the storytelling is a D&D story is a puzzle in which pieces are kind of assembled outside traditional linear structure. And I think if you're looking for a definition of what is storytelling in D&D, that is it. especially if you're talking homebrew, because you are master of everything. I think when you play books, again, massive holes in my knowledge. I've never run a campaign from a book. I don't know why you'd want to. That's not me having a pop at people who play books. I get it if you don't have time to go, I'm going to invent a new sport, or you're not insane enough to go, what is the economic strife of Carthage like, at 3 a.m. on a Thursday?
Yeah.
I get it. I think, speaking from someone who's only ever DM'd homebrew, storytelling is the way that you give them puzzle pieces that are still fun as a story to play. And we'll get into that more later, I guess. I'm saying that a lot for 3 minutes in. But it's also, it's breadcrumbs, but not all the breadcrumbs are from the same bag. But no matter how you lay them out, they're still fun to follow.
Mm-hmm. A lot of metaphor there to unpack.
Oh, fucking on. Yeah.
Tell me about these breadcrumb packs and why are they different breadcrumbs? So I asked a couple of my friends, my table fellows, as I do often before most recording sessions. I'm recording this topic. What does it mean to you to get a bit more of a holistic view rather than just downloads view? And one of them said, storytelling, and by extension, the story, whatever that may be, is integral to some, but optional to others. So how do you feel about, which is broadly a topic on different players, the game is different things to different players, but how do you feel about that when it comes to specifically to like the story and how that story is told?
I mean, I fucking hate it, but he's right. They're right, I should say. They are right. And as a writer outside of this, but as someone who enjoys the art of crafting a story, when you put it into D&D, and I think when you put it into anything really, yes, you have to kind of make your piece. Story's great. Story makes me happy. Story makes players happy. Makes some players happy. Some players want to turn up and kill something. Or they want to roleplay because they want to have that release of being someone else. And the story, a good story, has to be one that can cater to both. And I've been guilty of creating ones that are so fucking obtuse that you deliver you kind of learn how to deliver your punches, because you don't ever want to be trying to just outsmart your audience. I think that's a really important thing. But yeah, to return to your point, I think that player is absolutely right, and it kills me that they are absolutely right. And you have to be a really good storyteller, you have to make a story that if someone wants to jump in, the homebrew campaign that I ran up until very recently, Carthage, had a big subplot about diverted funds and illegal use of government funds and through private companies who were all linked into this shady criminal organization. And it was fucking great. And there was a couple of players who were like, well, we need to get that accountant and we need to shake him down and we need to steal his logbook and we need to go through it. And I was like, fucking A1. There were other players who sort of said, all right, well, when we get him in the room, you want someone to brandish an axe at him and get him squealing, or you want someone to do this or that, give us a call. And I was like, no, this is really good. This is an allegory for real life. Please make my dreams matter. Ultimately, though, you kind of have to cut your cloth based on what people want to see. And it's different to playing to the gallery. But yeah, I think going back to the original point, I would totally agree. And it kills me. But to be really good, some people go and see the latest Spider-Man and don't care why, I don't want to spoil it because it's only not been out that long, why certain people are in it. They just want to see Spider-Man jump around and thwip and the mask go on. And those people are fine. They're right. They have their place. And those people who want to go, oh, well, I think you'll find, Andrew Garfield, blah, 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 because it means something to them. And both of those audiences have to be accommodated, I would say. So yeah, it kills me, but they're absolutely right.
So there's a couple of things there that I wanted to talk about. So one is how do you do that? Well, actually, I'm going to take one step back from myself, because I was going to say, as a DM, how do you do that and achieve that and facilitate that? However, that implies that it's the DM's job to do that, to achieve that, to make that happen. Now, how much of the balance is between DM, the GM, and the players then when it comes to telling a good story, to take the easy way out of asking that question?
Well, I think the teller of the story is the DM, ultimately, because players aren't characters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, if you're someone that goes, I have a great idea for a book, but I'm going to make it a DM, I'm going to make it a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, take out any kind of assumption that those characters will do what your characters did, because they fucking won't, because they're humans by design. I think what you've got to do as a DM is bring them all the things they need.
Yeah.
So that they can't possibly fuck it up when they try and assemble it, even if they're using 2 different kits. And it's about having stories that sit together, and we'll go into that if you like, because there is a difference in terms of main storylines and sub-storylines.
Yeah.
I do think it's, especially if you're homebrew, if you want to do it, you got to fucking do it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no half measures, because you are, I always say, you're the Xbox. Anyone can sit down. I can sit on FIFA and score 20 own goals because the game allows.
Yeah.
But the game is running the crowds, the score, the commentators, everything else. That's you. Don't take DMing, like, if you're seriously into homebrew, and again, running the books is different, but if you're homebrew and you're kind of fucking electing yourself to say, I've got something that's going to be great, because I want to sacrifice years of Wizards of the Coast material to say, no, I got this, guy.
I know.
This is the story we're going to tell.
Don't worry,
exactly,
you rest easy over there. A team of 20 authors and 40 editors, and
Okay. I think Daddy's got this. It's fine. Yeah, you've got to I think you do. I think you've got to, like, and I'm not saying that every DM has to be held to this impossible fucking standard, but I do think there's an onus where you go, I've created a continent, and I have created everything within that continent, and you will exist in it, and you will have a rich and rewarding experience. Yeah, the players can't go around and murder hobos. There's basic decency in terms of how you play the game. But I think you got to, if they're gonna zag when you want them to zig every time, and they might, you got to come correct. That's your job. That's your job.
I'm very, very, very happy that you have clearly defined your hill and are willing to stand at the top and die on it.
On the starter set, it's nothing but opinions, and Ed's kind of mediating with the audience. No, I think I just why play around, like, set expectations of yourself and set expectations of your campaign, because I think if you do that, then just everything's better, isn't it? The rising tide lifts all ships.
I just know that there might be some listeners, and I know that there are people out there that are very how can I put this, approach it from a different point of view, is my political stance on the matter, in that they they are very much like, no, the DM and GM are not the storytellers, they are just the facilitators, and it's the players and the characters that tell the story, and it's a collaborative effort if you want to fall down the middle.
I mean, of course it's a collaboration. It's not, and here's where I'm maybe betraying certain styles of my DMing. But I had 2 of my players, and Ed played in Carthage, and he was having a chat with someone else who played in Carthage, and that person said, you can sometimes feel when Sam's railroading you, but it's so good you don't care. And I kind of took that as a little bit of a complisalt, in as much as, I don't want to be seen to be railroading, because that's not good DMing. But if you do see the joins, and you know, and the story's so rich that you don't really give a shit, and you're like, okay, fuck it, let's do it. Fine, cool. Are you having fun? That's great. You know, it's Eddie Murphy, isn't it? It's do you hear that story about Eddie Murphy was getting famous and doing his stand-up, and he got a call off Bill Crosby, Bill Crosby, and he said, this was the 1980s, and he said, I think you should maybe tone down your language, and tone down because you're a young man and you can't, and you're bringing it, And Eddie Murphy says, he listened and he nodded, and he put the phone down and he rung Richard Pryor, and he said, Richard, Bill's called me, and he said X, Y, Z, and Rich Pryor famously said, tell me something, son. Do the people laugh? And Eddie Murphy says, yeah. And he says, well, tell Bill Cosby to have a Coke and a smile and shut the fuck up. It's fine. And that was it. And I think sometimes if people are having fun, you did good.
Yeah.
You did good.
I think it speaks, that example you just gave, it also speaks to I don't like to use the word, but the maturity or the expertise of the players in that case as well, who have the wherewithal to spot the seams, which means that they know, they are comfortable enough and experienced enough with the game to be able to spot the seams, but then also to be like, oh, okay, I know what the DM is trying to do here, and I'm going to help them achieve it. I trust them that it's going to be good because I trust them. Because
you always get a bit of that, because your players, by and large, are going to be people you know. Their friends, or a lot of the people that were in the Carthage campaign are people who became friends through playing that campaign and just meeting up and we became friends through that. They know that I like Marvel films. They know I like The Wire. They know that I'm kind of ambivalent to Lord of the Rings, but I fucking love Star Wars. You know what you're going to get if you're presented with certain things in the game. If you know how that DM operates, you're going to go, right, yeah, and should we trust big business or should we go with a plucky underdog? Well, it's a Sam campaign, so, don't buy Nestle products or whatever. It's one of those things, isn't it? You've got a kind of... And then, I think, it does go on to the players to suspend disbelief as much as they can and go the divide between player knowledge and character knowledge.
Yeah.
Then it becomes a collaboration where you're both kind of winking. I'm the magician, you're the audience, and we're both kind of pretending because we don't really want to see the joins.
Yeah.
So let's share in that, and you've just got to give them a good enough reason to share in that.
I don't really want to see you cut someone in half with a bladed saw on stage, but like I kind of do.
Some people do, and that's what a good story is. We've established that, don't we?
So yeah, no, I think to put you at ease in terms of both your DMing style and how you approach storytelling is, I am very much on the same side as you, which is shit for the show. Sorry, listeners, because now we're both on the same side. But gutted. But no, I do think sometimes it is. I've spoken to DMs before who are a little bit tentative, and they're like, oh, well, I've got this planned, but I don't know if that's too much or not enough, or I don't consider myself a storyteller. And I always like to think like, well, nah, like it is, like you are, it's fine. You can definitely have that moniker as well as the 20 other hats you have to wear when you're sitting behind the screen, and one of them can be storyteller. You just happen to hold that storytelling torch for 75% of any given session, and the rest of the 25% is spread between the players.
And I think if anyone's complaining that maybe their characters, and this might be a controversial thing actually.
Here we go.
So if you wanted that difference, you wanted that friction, strap on, guys.
I hate Star Wars and I love Lord of the Rings. No, I don't. But
I hate people and I hate dragons. No, I think if you've got a point where you need your characters to do a thing. I had a, and I won't go into the details. There was a point in Carthage, the campaign, after ages, where all the characters were in a room and they had to push a button to do a thing. I don't want to tell you what the thing was because it sounds fucking ridiculous and it might come into the show at some point. They had to push a button. And 2 of the characters wanted to, and 2 of the characters didn't want to. Now, I had nothing for if they don't push that button. Because they got to push the button. Because pushing the button is a story. But they pushed the fucking button. Because the story was good enough to convince them that up until that point, across the 70 or 80 sessions or whatever it was that you have to push the button. And that you know how the world works. You know how the people around you work. You know the stakes, because I've given you the stakes. And I've shown you examples of the stakes. I haven't told you the stakes. I've shown you, because that's all good storytelling is showing, not telling.
Yep.
And they push the button. So if they're not pushing the button, you have to ask yourself, first of all, you have to act and go, oh, fuck, I need a reason. I need to import something quickly to make them push the button. And that's dungeon mastering. But storytelling, you have to you can build the door and make it as inviting as possible. And your job is to do those things well enough that they want to walk through it. They want to push the button. And it feels like a natural thing.
Very well put. I'm just trying to unpack there, like, I'm always flattered in a way because I do that. Well, I DM for that people have found fun for 70 plus sessions as well.
A long time you've had a homebrew, isn't it?
Yeah, so clearly people are happy about it. Like, They keep coming back. And in fact,
the fools.
As a matter of fact, I've spent a lot of the last 2 weeks. This is recorded beginning of January, planning for the return of the camp. We've had our Christmas holiday. I think the last time we played was maybe like 3 and a bit weeks ago. So planning for that. Okay, that was really good. Fucking don't know how I did it, but it was end of a chapter. So absolutely perfect timing. Boss battle. You get the MacGuffin. Everybody's happy. Boom.
Yeah.
We'll see you in 3 weeks because it's Christmas and New Year's. In that boss battle, I mean, the 2 characters died. So I spent a lot of the last 2 weeks helping those guys build new characters. They're starting at level 10, so there's an additional overhead in the backstory of like, how are you level 10? Like, you haven't just woken up one day and gone, I guess I'm a paladin today. I've got access to 5th level spells. Like, it doesn't.
Yeah. Where was Doctor Strange and Winter Soldier, man? Yeah. It's that kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. So I've had to put a little bit, work with them to be like, what have you done for the last X years to get you up to level 10? Anyway, but that is what I've lost my train of thought. I was just too excited talking about the start of my new campaign, which I guess is a good thing. But no, I've been working with them, and this is actually a good question that's going to bring me on to, can you discern a difference, or perhaps describe the difference between world building and storytelling?
Yes. I think, and I'm going to playfully but firmly draw your attention to the Tales of Tarthage podcast, of which 2 series are available from the link at the bottom of the show. With the first series of Tales of Tarthage, there was a lot. I got to a point where I had written 9 episodes, and it was the story. Everything you needed for the story was in those 9 episodes, and there were 9 episodes. And I think if you go back and listen to the first series, you'll be able to tell which 9 were written first. In a good way, I think, and people who listen to the show, they keep coming back, so they must like it too, right? Or is that painfully blindsided? Anyway, I had those 9 episodes, or 8 or 9 episodes, and it was the story. And the acts of Act 1, Episode 1, play out to fruition, to the cliffhanger that became the season finale. And I looked at it and I just went, it's too fucking thin. There's too much implied knowledge. Now, it's very hard to get away from that because I've lived in that city in my head for years and years. And I know why XYX happens on a Thursday and not on a Saturday, for example. And I sort of looked at the story, and it opens with I think anyone who's listened to it will know the first 3 episodes are bang, bang, bang. Very, this happens, that happens, then this happens, just to chill out. And I had to pick a point where I was going to go, I'm going to have to put, what else do I want to show people? And this is where world building over storytelling comes in. And I spoke to my beautiful wife, who has to endure all kinds of absolute nonsense. Like, I'll walk into the bedroom at 11:30 after she hasn't seen me all day, and I go, it's Friday, there's ninjas, it's going to be fine, and then walk out again. And she said, well, what else do you think's important to that world? And I said, well, we've got to show them the relationship between the Watch and the public, because it is, to all intents and purposes, a police procedural show by way of Middle-earth. We've got to show them the relationship between the Watch and the public. Okay, what else? We do need to sort of show them XYZ, and we need to show them a little bit more of these characters so it can inform. So when these characters make decisions in the future, people don't go, whoa, I thought I had a bead on that person.
Yeah.
So I think, to answer your question, storytelling is the bones, and it fucking needs to be there, because a bad story with lots of filler gets you. I mean, I haven't had enough wine to slag off enough projects or IPs, but we all know what bad storytelling with lots of style looks like.
Yeah.
Right? I think world building is kind of the skin and the flesh and the bones, and it makes it sexy, and it informs it, and it kind of gives your people, your listeners, your viewers, your audience a way in, and it makes them feel confident. You know, why are in Tarthage we had the Watch, they're the police force. Why are they always fucking miserable? Because they're not trusted by the public. Why? Here's why. And here's an episode that explains that. Not, someone in front of a whiteboard, which would be the easy way out to go, hello and welcome to Watch Training 101. Lesson 1, why does the public fucking hate us? You don't do that. You have to, and this is where, there are fundamental laws of storytelling, show, don't tell, being the most fucking obvious one. And I wrote this episode to delineate between the two and to sort of make myself feel good in the process. I wrote an episode that delineated and showed why the public didn't trust the watch. And people message me about the episode and go, that was a fucking good episode. And I go, and nothing happens, really. And that kind of informed, because with Carthage, you have like the first two, each episode is about 6-7 pages long. The first 2 to 3 pages are like a vignette, like a little something, 2 characters talking. We see an interaction that informs the world and sets a narrative tone for the rest of the episode. So I'm letting you in behind the curtain now, but I'm not. If this is just good storytelling. And I think it became, again, to return to storytelling versus world building, I would look at an episode and go, I've got 7 pages. 2 to 3 have to be world building, that little vignette at the beginning.
Yep.
And the other 4 to 5 have to be story. And you can always tell when that, and I can tell listening to Carthage when I was like, oh fuck, I need to tell some more story. Because you get it out of whack. I think good Carthage episodes, I think good episodes of anything like that, have that mix. They inform 30, 40% and entertain 60, 70. Mm-hmm. So I think the difference is they go hand in hand, but one is ultimately more important. Because how many times have you seen a film and gone, it's a shame, man. Them actors were shit. The story was a good premise, good story, but wasn't very well executed. Mm-hmm. No one comes out and goes, it fucking looked beautiful, but it was dog shit. Really, and still say on top of that, oh, but then I enjoyed it.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? No, you don't want Moulin Rouge. You don't want Moulin Rouge.
That's today's soundbite is you don't want Moulin Rouge.
You don't want Moulin Rouge because it's great, but you look and you go, did you like what happened half an hour in? I don't fucking... Was Obi-Wan singing? I don't know. I don't know. What would you concur with that? Would you draw that same line of divide? What do you think?
You've cracked my host defense very well, but it's the lines are a lot more blurred for me, and perhaps it's because of my inexperience, shall we say. Like I enjoy writing things. God knows how good they are. So I struggle with. Actually, here's in my defense, what I struggle with is really identifying which is which. So I'll write a whole bunch of stuff, maybe an encounter, maybe they go here, and here's the paragraph I say to the players that explains that is very much here's what you see when you arrive at this city, XYZ, ABC.
And someone says, can I check for traps? Yeah, shut the fuck up. I have 2 more lines. Then you can check for traps.
Actually, I've been really fortunate on that. I have to say, as for having 6 players, they humour me enough now to know, like, we'll let him do his thing, and then we'll check for traps.
I did 5 once, and that was way too much. 5 was just...
It was 6, but entering into the new year, one's taken a brief hiatus, so he is down to 5 again, and we'll see how that will affect the dynamic.
Yeah.
But I like building and planning, interesting characters, interesting settings, interesting, the way they act, the way they're going to talk, and I think a lot of that is world building to a certain extent, because it's, they go to this elven city that's floating up in the sky. I mentioned several times in the show before that it's very much like Dalaran from World of Warcraft, or like Hogwarts, but a flying city up in the sky, and there's brooms that are brushing the streets, automatically. There's holographic maps that, you just look at, and little red pulsars tell you where to go on the map to go to your destination. And that's fun to think and build in that. And so that also sets the scene then to be, this is, you are clearly in a place that's full of magic and people that can use magic.
And that's the thing, isn't it? That's a really good example. Like, I think, and the example I just rattled on about was about Carthage as an audio play series, which we'll go on to a little bit later if you want. But I think to take that out and thinking about how I would play that, you're absolutely right with the examples you've just given. Like, Carthage has floating carriages, but only certain parts do. Why don't they? Doesn't matter. There is a reason. But if they ask the question, well, these poorer areas don't have subway stops. Cool. There's a reason. That informs the world. There is magical industry, but there's way more magic in the Western Quarter because there's a shitload of money. And there isn't. There's loads of hollowed out mines that don't run anymore in the Southern District. Why is that? Never really said, but it's referred to. People aren't dumb. People get the inference. So no, I agree with you there. There's a shitload more opportunity to world build when you're straight DMing.
Yes, yeah. And that reminded me definitely of another thing I wanted to mention. That separation of DM knowledge is that is the ongoing problem for every DM ever. Is so like it's almost an impossible one to solve because there's no way.
How do you mean?
Like you said, like it's hard for a classic example is, I set this thing up and my players didn't go for it, or I did this and for some reason they went the other way, or they did murder this person, but it's so obvious. It was so obviously that was the innocent person, and that in various different forms and various different examples and settings and variables. But like it's so hard to disassociate yourself from or to try and understand what the players know, which is like another filter, another layer in between what they're actually gonna try and second guess what they're actually gonna do.
Yeah, I think that's something that I've counteracted, and not really consciously, but in Tarthage, the players, they play. If you listen to the show, there's 4 people of what's called an extraordinary crimes unit. And the premise of the campaign is that you are 4 members on that. And that was never up for discussion because I didn't know what I was doing when I started DMing. I didn't know there was such a thing as a Session Zero where they could say, well, actually, I want to be... No, you're part of the police. Yeah. Right? And in doing that, what the police do whenever they find a clue, they go back to the office and they say, right, what do we know? And hearing you say that, I'm kind of glad that I'm much of a lucky idiot as I am, because they were always forever going. The first or last half an hour of every session was, right, so he was fucking involved and we know he was there, but we don't trust him. And I'm like, right, this is... Because that always gives the opportunity to go, well, if that's what you think you know, and there hasn't been a bust up for a little bit, I'm gonna turn that. And he wasn't the innocent fella. That bloke with the children's heads on spikes, he was innocent. He was just not understood.
You are a lucky bastard for having that set up that allows you to hear,
So lucky. And I don't want anyone, this is my request, I don't want anyone to listen to this show and think that because I'm relatively articulate about storytelling, I'm anything other than an average DM. I've been gifted with wonderful players, and my best friend who I do a D&D podcast with is sat exactly to my right every time. And when someone says, what's the fall damage of 6 people falling 300 feet? I can go, I don't fucking know. Ed? And Ed will go, page... It's like having a director of film and a director of photography. Always. But he's also in the movie. So I don't want anyone to think that I'm some sort of savant DM, because I'm fucking absolutely not. What I do have is I think a good understanding of story. And I think that kind of... sometimes you're being railroaded, but you don't give a shit. So I must be doing something right in that. Yeah, just to preface everything I've said for the last 40 minutes.
But like so many times I've, you get players that will latch onto one obscure throwaway comment you made as a DM like 50 sessions ago now. Oh, but that last time we spoke to him, they said this, and I'm like, fuck, did I say that? Oh shit, yeah, of course that's going to completely colour your next interaction with him.
Fucking brother that had the same name, kind of.
And it really does explain, when they... I know I've had it before, like if an NPC is acting a certain way and they are struggling to vibe or to interact in it in an effective, communicate in an effective way. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, this person is clearly, an obnoxious, holier than thou intelligista that thinks they're cleverer than everybody. Whereas all they've had so far is, hello, would you like to come in and drink some tea? So to me, when they're being overtly obnoxious to the players, that's fine. That's just who this character is. But it's the players. They're like, this guy's a knob and we're going to have to kill him.
But there again, I think in Tarthage, the campaign was never high fantasy. So I automatically took the option of, this guy's a prick, let's cave his head in and hide him in the bushes. I all but took that off the table. Because you can't do that if you're a police force. because the premise of the first session of Tarthage was a one-shot, and it was Catch the Killer. And for those of you who have listened to the first 2 series of Tarthage, that is what that is. That campaign was that. There's the election. It's not a great city. There's a religious fluggity-plug, and there's someone wandering around skinning people. Now, you can dive into that other shit as much as you want, and it will help you or it won't. But you have to catch the killer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. That's the story. The story is there's a guy doing wrong, and you got to solve it. And that's ultimately the story. And I think people get very, like you sort of said, like, oh, it's obviously this, and I have this plan for this NPC, and it's going to be like a little learning curve about the world. And good. Great, and I think that I do love that kind of shit. Like, he comes in, he's got all these books, none of that, you notice that, roll a perception check, you notice that while he has all these books, none of them have been read, they're all very dusty. That informs character. I think ultimately sometimes you have to remember what the story is you're telling.
Yeah.
And I think that's when, because people sort of latch onto that, is it Joseph Campbell? There's only 7 stories. It's man versus nature, man versus machine, man versus self, which I think is the only story, really. But whatever. You kind of have to roll it back and go, well, this is the thing. It's moving on slightly to another project that Starset Studios has coming up, the Let's Get Shawarma Marvel Multiverse Tabletop RPG. We're doing a Let's Play, and I'm going to be the games master for that. And I was thinking about, I'm like, Kid in a Candy Store. I can have any Marvel villain I want, and I can, Ed's going to create his character, and it's going to be great, and we're going to set it in Chicago, and we're going to do all this. And I had to stop myself and go, what is the story? Let's think about the character, the lead character, Ed's custom-made hero. What do they want? Because that will inform the kind of story. And then from there, you build the world. From there, you go, right, well, we want this is the theme. Okay, well, what characters fit that theme? Oh, I really want Carnage. Well, it don't fit. So you don't get it. And if you force it, he'll feel it.
Mm-hmm.
So don't do that. You see what I mean?
No, I think that's, as you said, it's like seeing the wood for the trees, right? It's so, as a home brewer, it is so exciting, and something that I've fallen foul of before is just to run away and build all this extra cool stuff, and it is so easy to lose sight of, but what is meant to be happening here? What is, all the bells and whistles, and the brooms sweep the streets by themselves, and all that kind of stuff can sometimes obfuscate the journey that we're trying to go on together. And I think that's a really good way that you said there of, like, for example, having Carnage in, is that gonna serve the story or take away from the story? And then it's a simple decision.
Exactly. I think I've been getting into cooking recently. I'm a huge fan, I have been for a long time, of the late great Anthony Bourdain. And someone asked him once, how do you make a great burger? Innocuous question for a chef of renowned skill. And he says, a burger should have lettuce, it should have a patty, it should have tomato, and I will allow you mayo. Don't use a brioche bun. Before you're going to add bacon or any kind of cheese, ask yourself, am I making this better, or am I doing this for me? And I think that's something that you should do that in all facets of life. And I think with a D&D campaign, and the storytelling through which it's like, you could have your final boss be a big world-ending Thanos figure who comes in and says, I am everything you are not, and that's why you got to stop me. Or you can have your villain be, and this is how the Tarthage campaign ended. And for those of you who enjoy the show, this is not how the show will end. Don't worry. The end of the campaign was, remember that big button I was telling you about earlier? It was a time machine. Jump the shark. Yeah, fucking right. You're damn right, it was the last thing we did. And they went back in time to stop this warlord, right? Because they'd gone out into the jungle for whatever reason, and they just heard about this story about Corvax, this guy, he's coming. He's raised the 5 armies of hell, and he's coming to Tarthage. You need to be ready. So they go back in time to stop him. They go back in time, and they have a little bit of Life on Mars for our American audiences. It's like a time-traveling cop show where someone goes back in time and they get to, like, meet their parents, and it's kind of Back to the Future but with more sort of aggression, and it's a cop show. Anyway, it's great. And they have all these they meet their gruff police chief as a younger person, a new recruit, and there's a lot of back and forth there because he was dead in their time, and And they track this guy down to a farm in the Northern Territory. And they're like, this guy's going to come out fucking Bangkok ready. He's a warlord. In 20 years, he's Joseph Stalin, but with an infinity gauntlet, essentially. Yeah. And they turn up, and he's a bloke. And he says, hello. Oh, you're the people from my dreams. I've been having these weird dreams. And the whole party went, are you such and such? And he goes, yeah. And they go, well, have you ever heard of Korvax? And he goes, yeah, it's I was in the military. There was a village called Korvax, and we were ambushed. And then you watch the penny drop, and they go, fuck, that's where he got his name. When he goes mad, that's where he got his name from. And he goes, well, I suppose we've got a lot to talk about. Do you want to come in for some tea? And all of them went, yeah, okay. And that was the end of the campaign. And that was it. And they made the choice. And they had they said, just fucking sit tight a minute, mate. And they were having conversations like, we can't kill him for something he hasn't done yet.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that where it got to? Yeah.
That where it got to. And they made the choice in-game to stay in the past and watch him. So if he ever looked like he was going bad, they'd intervene. And that, I think, bringing it all the way around to storytelling again, that, I think, is a way better story than evil. Bang. No more evil. Call me old-fashioned. I just think it's a bit richer. I think everyone gets a bit more out of that. I don't know. What do you think? I've talked for another 20 minutes uninterrupted.
For the listeners, I actually just stepped away for 10 of those minutes. And,
it's a girl playing noughts and crosses with a clown, for those of you with certain age.
Well, coming out with the real British deep cuts today. I love it.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. Please alienate 80% of the audience. That's cool. No.
Absolutely, yeah. I enjoy Squarespace as a sponsor too. Anyway.
No, I agree. There is a richness and a depth there that is sometimes, not always, sometimes lacking in a two-dimensional good versus evil story. However, the overhead on the storyteller or the DM, depending on how you describe it, is a lot more. There is a lot more there. You need to,
of course.
So it's a trade-off. And here's where I'm going to counter at you and say this is the reason why some people play published modules is because they're like, fuck, I don't do any of that nonsense. I just want to.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I hope that I've not intimated that there's nothing wrong. All I've done is talk on what I know, and I'm aware that like some of those modules are widely considered to be some of the greatest publishing in the game, and I'm jealous that I will never get to. I don't know why the fuck Strahd's such a big deal. I get it, but I don't always, have the layer of knowledge. And I think, yeah, absolutely, you have to remember that I was building that campaign in the middle of lockdown, and I didn't have a job. So there's a lot of time to rewatch all those old movies and weld shit together and say, oh, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to steal that, and I'm going to have a bit of that, and and I can talk to all my players individually, and I can play as often as I want, because guess what? No one's fucking doing anything else anyway. So
no, come on, Sam, you're way too modest. Both our homebrew campaigns are way better than Curse of Strahd. Like
you know what? No one's ever accused me of being too modest before. But yeah, I get it. I do get why people play the games, and it's not to say, if I could talk on it, I would, but I can't, so I don't.
Yeah.
And don't take that for some sort of, well, I think you'll find it in my campaigns. Either it is or it isn't.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's down to the players and it's down to the audience. And I think just because my campaign is X, Y, Z and focuses on things I deem to be narratively important does not take away from the narrative importance of go here and kill the vampire, because it can be just as rich. In some cases, richer because it's simpler.
Yes.
No one ever had to steal, no one ever had to kidnap Strahd's accountant and steal his financial records to get another plot point, which is something that happened in Starfish once or twice.
Oh, I had a question. Obviously, we've talked a lot about how as GMs and people who do more of the heavy lifting when it comes to planning and preparing and story management, to again use a politically benign term. As a player, how could you? What are your thoughts on how can you help when you're limited in your power? As a GM, you're not limited in power, but when you are limited in what you can do at any given moment, how can you help tell a good story?
I think have a backstory for your character that informs your character's motivations, but has plenty of scope to fit into the world.
Mm-hmm.
So go to your DM, as I did for a character for a campaign, for example, who is doing a wholly homebrew campaign. And I said, hey, I'm thinking about this. And to make that make sense, I can maybe he comes from the Feywild, but how does that fit into your world, man? Because there's nothing about that in the PDF that you've put out. And I just didn't want to just say, I'm from the Feywild. Yeah. You now have to do all this other shit. And luckily, the DM said, I haven't thought, but yeah, it could definitely be part of the world. And it then came up later on in the story. But if he hadn't been from the Feywild, he could have been from somewhere else. Mm-hmm. It was more that he was displaced son of royalty. And that royalty happened to be the Sealy Court. It didn't matter that it wasn't whatever. So go in and have those again. I think the rules of storytelling, as we've sort of laid out, are like, have the broad strokes themes, know those simple things. And then when you go to your DM, you can say, I want this character to be like this, and here's why. But what do you think? And they'll say, well, maybe he was involved in this conflict, or maybe she was a student at this university, or maybe they were a part of this, because this is shit that informs them going anyway, and it's great if you're tied to it. Mm-hmm. Nothing's worse than if you come in and you've got 6 people who have backstories that are now not only need to be played out, but also need to be established because they haven't been hooked into the world.
Yeah.
And that's on you as a player. You can't come in and go, he will do this, she will do that, and they will do this together, and I will have no movement upon this. Because your DM will see things that you don't. Yeah. Because that's what second eyes are all about. You will see things about the overall world that your DM doesn't, because you're far too close. Never bet on your own team, right? And they will say, if they're good, they'll say, hey, I was thinking about, just watch out for this person. Have you got anyone in your past that you could know? Would you like to? Would they inform me? Oh, yeah, go on, what you got? Well, there's going to be this someone that pops up, and I won't tell you what, but da-da-da-da-da-da. Fucking great. That's why you have session 0.
Yes.
So I think, yeah, you're and day-to-day, roll fucking investigation checks, roll insight checks, because you'd know that if the scene isn't moving on, there's something that you haven't seen. So roll an insight check and dump some stats into wisdom or whatever the fuck.
I think a good case in point of this is, as I mentioned, 2 of my players are running new characters, as we speak, and both of them were first timers when we started all those years ago, and both of their first characters were very obviously first characters. Let me put it like that. They were. Yeah. One was an amnesiac, and that was pretty much it. So,
Jason Bourne. That's not something you see ripped off a lot. I don't mean that sarcastic, though. That's actually that struck me, and I went, you were like, well, I think you'll find it's quite one-dimensional. I was like, that's fucking brilliant. That's amazing.
I mean, it was good as the DM, because I was like, here's a whole arc I can build, and I don't really need any input from him, because he doesn't even know, so it doesn't even matter.
3 months down the line, he's like, so I had 15 horses and 6 horse. Yeah, that's the one.
And then the other guy was not an amnesiac, but didn't like to talk about his past, so stifled a few role-play encounters with both the other players. So there was little get up and go between the pair of them. Now both those characters have died, so oh well.
Good, fuck 'em. Yeah.
However, the new characters are like, maybe we do this, and maybe I know this guy, and maybe I travelled with him, and maybe that's why I'm the way I am, and this is all the other stuff. And because I've said to them, you're not making a character in isolation. Here's a 5-page document of all the NPCs you've met. Here's a 4-page document that says who the gods are in this world and what that means if you were to support one of them. Hook off of any of that. The places you've been to. Hook off of any of those. Here's a map of the world. Throw a fucking dart and pick a place.
That's where you're from, yeah. But that's good, though, isn't it? And I think I had to do that because I hadn't played at all until a year ago, really. Not properly. I DM for so long, but it's a totally different skill set. And I did make a character that was, you know, the adopted son of the Sealy court, and he was a little bit of a Thor ripoff, and he talked like this, and he had a hammer, and it was great.
Oh, just a little bit of a Thor ripoff.
Yeah, you get into it. Yeah, fuck you. There's more to my art than that. No, there's not. But then you get into the quest, and then I kind of said to the DM, look, I kind of want to try something else. My second thing out of my mouth was, is this going to fuck anything up? Because that should always be your question, because you made the character. It's as much on you as it is on them. And he said, no, not at all. Try what you're thinking. And I said, he's just a guy from a clan who lives in the forest, and he looks at the stars, and the stars aren't moving correctly, and the rest of his family have left or died, because that's just what the clan does. And he's kind of just on his way to look at stuff. And he went, yeah, let's do it. And it was my favourite. His name was Cormoran Vale. And he was like, yes, just everyone calm down a little bit. Let's have a sit down and let's have a little something to eat. Do you like food? Do you like bacon? And he was that role-playing lube. Do you know what I mean? I don't think I agree with that. You know, and he would occasionally come up, but he had really fucking high insight. So if we were ever in a situation where it's like, okay, as a DM, I kind of know there's something else probably going on.
Yeah.
But I don't want to spoil the pie. I don't want to be going, well, I think I know the... I just rolled an insight check, and he had like a +6 on insight, which is fucking great, because you're just like, yes, he doesn't tie his shoes left and right. Do you know what I mean? That kind of
But thank you for giving me for corroborating my thing earlier on, where I said that one good mark of a good player is that appreciation of what the DM is going. So as you said there, like, I know what something's up here, but I'm not going to be like, everyone stop the game. Clearly the DM wants us to do this. Let's just go and do it. Because I personally
and no one likes that person. Yeah. No one likes that person at the table. You don't like him for DM. You want that person to die slow if you're a DM. But you also, as a player, you're like, yeah, okay, yeah, we all know, but some of us don't. It doesn't matter. It's the telling, isn't it? It's the trust the tale, not the teller. You know, you've got to kind of get in there and, like we said at the beginning, allow yourself to be willfully deceived.
Yes.
And if someone goes, well, I can clearly see that he's got another dove that's healthy under his sleeve, no one cares.
Yeah.
Do that better.
Yeah, no one wants to be that guy.
Yeah, no one wants to be that person.
I saw the wire up his running around his neck. Yeah, I saw the wire. Yeah,
great, well done. It's like the person that shouts out the punchline at a comedy gig. It's like, fuck that person.
Yeah, I've not paid to see you, friend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, is your name on the billboard? No, shut the fuck up.
So I know you. One last thing that I was thinking about, and that we've kind of skirted it a little bit. You did mention it earlier on around railroading and how that is generally bad.
Considered bad.
Yeah, it depends again on your definition and the state of it and the context. Obviously, context is everything, and the state of the game and blah 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 blah. Where do you fall on that spectrum then of like, when is it okay? When is it even not better than okay? When is it even necessary? You might say, not to lead the witness.
I think railroading is. I think it's a somewhat loaded term.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people who accuse other DMs of it on the reg are expecting something than most other DMs can provide. Because a lot of DMs aren't Matt Mercer.
Mm-hmm. Almost all.
Right. A lot of people that kick a football about aren't Sergio Aguero or whatever. Do you know what I mean? A lot of people that are in Amdram aren't Ian McKellen.
Yeah.
So if you're going in and you're judging by that standard, to a point, just to a point, because I think there's another conversation about holding standards to yourself or whatever. I'm not getting into that. I think you're going to be sort of disappointed because you've set yourself up for a fall. Because, you know, I wish that I was as good at doing voices and as good at doing voices as other people, but you're not.
Yeah, as a professional career voice actor, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Why is Matt Mercer so good? Because it's his fucking job. Let's be honest. Yep. He don't do it every other Sunday when everyone can sort of park the kids and park their partners and find 4 hours to sit in front of a computer around a table. But I think railroading, therefore, there is that little bit of oh, I don't think you should do it. But I think if you have to lead a horse to water, there is still an element of onus on you to make the horse want to drink.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it is good because, what is railroading? You've just said you ended your 3-year campaign, or at least that arc of it, with a big boss. Now, they've turned up and they've not gone, well, do you know what? I heard he built an orphanage, so I'm going home. Of course they didn't. You railroaded them into fighting that person or that thing. In certain respects. If you really want to go down to it, Do I railroad people? I was playing a one-on-one campaign, testing out a new world with my better half. And I presented her a choice. And I didn't have nothing if she didn't pick the other way. If she went, do you know, I want to leave it. You got to railroad them a little bit. It's not whether you do it or not. It's how well you do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's how well you do it. It's how well you set up that big boss to go, we're going to kill him. Because that's what the story requires. Because if we leave him be, he's going to eat the world. Because that's what we've set up.
Yeah.
It's about how well you do it. No one actually thinks that the magician kills the dove and brings it back to life, right?
Yeah.
No one actually thinks that. But you're led to believe it. But if the magician comes out and goes, this is a real dove, I fucking promise, real dove, not rubber, because I've heard you can get them, but this isn't one. Or railroading. But if the magician comes out and says, I am a master of life and death, and I can rearrange the molecules, and I can just make this dove disappear, and then I can rearrange the molecules, and he's appeared again. One of those is better sold than the other. So do it. Fucking do it. Just do it well. Where appropriate.
Yes.
To service your story. Which should be the caveat of everything I've
yes.
said.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I love that. When is basically made me think of when is railroading not railroading? Or it was. I mean, obviously, all the published adventures have a set beginning, middle, and end. I can't think of a more ironic way of.
And you can't talk to me about storytelling, even in this sort of non-linear breadcrumbs way, without railroading. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, again, at the beginning of the conversation, we talked about the relationship between players and DMs. No one goes, right, so your DM leads you out into the jungle and says, the mystical city is here, you are here. No one goes, I'm going to go fucking east, and I'm going to walk, and I'm just going to walk.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm going to do. Because you want to know what's in the mystical city. Shut up. Of course you do. Of course you do.
Of course you do.
But of course you do if your DM's right. So maybe it's more of a cyclical left hand washes right hand relationship than I previously thought.
Quite possibly.
At which point we've all learned something, haven't we, Dan?
We have. The value of this podcast continues to increase, and I
wouldn't go that far. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I mean, it started pretty low, mate. So it doesn't take much.
Yeah. Let me tell you how we agree on everything.
But I mean, that's what I was thinking of. Obviously, it's, as you said, it has a bad rap, and it can be seen as very binary or absolutionist.
But so does. If you look at films, people say, oh, well, the plot wasn't very good, was it? The plot was just, How many people about Avatar, the James Cameron movie, said, well, I think you'll find the plot isn't very good. No, but you're not going for the fucking plot, you idiot. You're going for the virtual reality 4D, whatever the fuck it was.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like the Blue Horseman. And it has to take a back seat to make way for other stuff. No one wants to watch The Godfather by way of Avatar because there's too much going on. The plot is wonderful, but then if you were to put the visual effects, you just want to kill yourself. So one has to make way for the other, and that's why we have jokes like, oh, well, this was a roleplay session. Yeah, because that services when player X goes down in the next battle. No one gives a shit if we don't have this roleplay episode.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many people get up on the high horse about, well, I think the plot wasn't great, but the was great, or that wasn't great, but sometimes that's a conscious choice because shit has to make way. Because you've got to be really good. You've got to be like David Simon levels of great writer.
Yeah. To
make everything just work.
Yes, yeah.
To make everything
with
click.
No concessions or anything like that. Yeah.
No
absolutely.
Concessions, no joins, no questions. Well, why didn't McNulty? If he knew that.
Yeah.
Come on, man. It's just that sometimes it's just that good, but very rarely. And don't hold yourself to that standard. Do the best, closest thing you can do to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love how that. There is this disdain for railroading, but then obviously 9 campaigns out of 10. Maybe I'm being facetious, but many campaigns will have a big bad And at what point is that onus to go and destroy the big bad? That in of itself is railroading, which I kind of like the perfect,
Definitely.
Ouroboros snake eating its own tail kind of argument.
No,
there.
exactly. You're so right, Dan. I think it's defined railroading. Railroading to me, because I think I know what people mean. They say, you go into a tavern, there's 3 old women and they don't really look good, and then there's one man and he has a dog, and the dog looks at you and says, everything is a lie. That's railroading. What happens if I go left, DM? Nothing happens. It's a blank hallway. That's railroading, but it's done poorly.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if I go left, DM? It appears to be a dead end. Well, I'm going to roll an investigation check. You do that. I roll a 20. You see that there is nothing really wrong, and the mildew is consistent with the season, and it has grown. Oh, okay. That's my curiosity sated. I am going to go left.
Yeah.
I had it when I was doing a campaign with Ed, doing a one-on-one campaign. We went into a bar, and there was an old woman that had lots of blink pets. She had a blink parrot and a blink dog that would chase the blink cat, and they were just chasing each other around. And then there was an old guy with a paper. And I went, he knows me well enough to know. And he went straight over to that woman. And she was like, I'm going to shout at cheese. And he was like, right, I'm going to back off now. And I'm going to go and talk to the other guy. And the other guy was the person he should have talked to. That was railroading, but I kind of had something in the bag for if he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So do it. It's all storytelling is railroading. They want you to turn the next page. Just fucking do it well.
It is.
Sorry, Dan, you go now.
No, that is it. That's what I was alluding to. And you have hung that hat on that coat stand aptly. So thank you very much. Is there anything you want to talk about that we might have missed? I get the impression almost definitely, but
yeah, I mean, how long do you want the show to be? I think secrets of storytelling, show don't tell. All storytelling is intent and obstruction. That is what it is, ultimately. Luke wants to know where he's from, and the Death Star's in the way, and he falls into being part of the rebellion. Watch that movie. The rebellion is way more important than the Force, right?
Mm-hmm.
A New Hope being the movie. Anyway, is there anything I want to add? If you've enjoyed my ramblings, you can head over to Starter Set Show on Twitter and check out the Tales of Tarthage podcast. That's an audio play. There are 2 seasons of 12 or 13 episodes. If you liked Line of Duty or The Wire or Lord of the Rings, I'd like to think you'd like that. But who knows? I do all the voices. But give that a look. What else? As I've mentioned, I think there will be a brand new show from Starter Set Studios called Let's Get Shawarma. We'll be breaking down the brand new Marvel Multiverse role-playing game. We will be doing a Let's Play. If you go to letsgetshawarma.com now, you can learn more about that game because we have some new stories about what you want from it, what we might see in it, and that kind of thing. We'll also be populating an Instagram feed and doing a show when the new rulebook comes out at the end of March. All of Starter Set's podcasts are available on Spotify. Just search Starter Set Podcast. And it's a guide to everything from what race to pick to how to build a city. It's everything you need to know. We'd like to think about learning to play and then playing well the game of Dungeons & Dragons. And as I've said, there's also the Tales of Tarthage podcast that runs sort of intermittently for 2 seasons. And there will be more Tales of Tarthage, depending on how well behaved my newborn daughter is. She hasn't arrived yet. Coming this winter. Don't try and find me on social media, personally, because I'm not there. Look at my work. It's by far the more interesting of the 2.
Sam's a ghost.
And also, do you know what? Shout out to my hosting partner in everything good, really, with regards to Dungeons & Dragons that I do, Ed Sylvester, who also isn't on social media, but is a big, huge part of those shows and does way more research and understands the game way better than I do and is an infinite fountain of knowledge. So do check out. If you haven't enjoyed how I address the issue of Dungeons & Dragons, give Starter Set a chance anyway, because Ed might just be a cup of tea.
Saving grace at that.
Yeah, definitely. The amount of times I've been like, well, what if he was like the BFG and he could, with all the children and they all fell asleep, and he was like, well, what you're talking about there is a warlock and maybe he was a furball because he's a giant. And I'm like, that's exactly what I'm talking about, Ed.
Thank you for interpreting that. Well, thank you, Sam, for being the B team today. When Ed gets on, then we'll have the proper episode.
You're so right.
No, thank you so much for that. To everyone at home, obviously, all the links, all the pertinent links will be in the episode description as per usual. So all that's left to say is thank you ever so much, Sam, for joining us today. That was wow, from metaphors to damning indictments.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a whole kettle of fish. So thank you ever so much, Sam.
Oh, thank you for having me. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. It's just nice to talk about this stuff and not feel like you're getting on your soapbox and just have an opportunity to talk. And if you are a content creator and you want to come on Thinking Critically, Danilo has the best, most accommodating setup that you could ever wish to have, and it makes Starter Set's guest episodes look like an absolute joke. No, it's been really nice to have you, man, and it's been nice to talk. It's been great. I've had a lot of fun, and I'll happily come on again, either as part of a couple or single and ready to mingle.
Amazing. Green wristband ready to go. My secret of my success is for 90% of it having all the gear and no idea, and then you're kind of forced to at least have a modicum of an idea at some point, which is where we find ourselves today. So cool. Well, as usual, thank you everyone for listening at home. Please drop a like, a review on Spotify, because there are things you can do now. So please do that, and also the other usual avenues of showing your appreciation. I would very much appreciate it, and it would make my 2022. So please go ahead and do that. Thank you everyone for listening, and good night.
One more thing.
Oh.
If you're creating NPCs, make 5 really good ones, not 10 annoying ones. Get 5 ones that have aims and intents. And I've actually took notes of this. Aims, intentions, drives, and desires. Do 5 of those NPCs. And there's only so many regional actions you can do anyway, so just give them each one.
I mean, I like that. I asked a bit, is there anything we've missed that you want to talk about?
Yeah,
and
it's bad,
you
isn't it?
didn't. That's fine.
Page of notes. Page of notes. Didn't use.
Have you got a shredder in that room you're in? Or is that...
Yeah.
Just pop them straight in there.
Yeah.
And now it's time for the Patreon shout-outs. Thank you to Robert Hartley, DM for Viva la Dirt League and writer on the D&D Logic web series. I would encourage everybody to check him out at Robert Hartley GM on Twitter and Twitch. Thank you to Optional Rule, a 2-time guest of the show and a very insightful and knowledgeable source of information. Please check them out at www.optionalrule.com. Huge thank you to a great friend of the show, Matthew Perkins, who's out there making hilarious and educational Dungeons & Dragons content. Please go and check out his stuff at matthewperkins.net, where you can find links to all of his socials and all of his content, including his own Patreon, which I would very much encourage you to check out. Thank you to Matt Street at mpstreet88 on Twitter for supporting the show. If you need support running your personal or business schedule, head to virtualtimehustle.com or on Instagram to make that difference between should do and done. Boss it better with support from Kat, who will help you get back that essential time you've been searching for. If you would like to support what we do and get 4 shout-outs a month, head over to patreon.com/thinkingcritically, or you can just buy me a coffee at ko-fi.com/thinkingcritically